Bienvenidos sean todos ustedes. Welcome everybody, because we have tonight a very special show, and I'm really glad to have tonight's guest. And let me tell you, this is a person that I really admire because she has been working in a lot of places. She has a lot of experience. I really envy the kind of work that she has been doing for the past 10 years or perhaps even more. But don't be mistaken. She is actually very young. And let me introduce to you the young and beautiful Sarah Lane. How are you doing, Sarah?
Oh, Dan, thank you so much. Yeah, I was like 10 years. That is nice of you. But yes, I'm doing great, and I'm so glad to be here. We've been trying to make this happen for a few weeks now, so it finally happened tonight, and I'm thrilled.
I am really excited. And perhaps you in the audience, to people who are getting here, remember that you can send us some messages in the different places where you are catching this transmission, in Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and they will be appearing at the bottom of the screen. If I find them relevant, I will mention them during the screen. And if you don't know about Sarah, well, mostly I hear about her in some of the shows that I listen regularly. For example, one of those is, let me actually show you in the screen, guys. It's the DTNS show, Daily Tech News show, where she's co-hosting with Tom Merritt, one of my favorite shows. Actually, that's the show that I listen in the morning so I can have a wonderful time for the rest of the day. And if you're a patron, you will get actually the GDI section or the GDI part of the show. But Sarah also has a particular show that I really enjoy a lot. And I was recommending it to one of my friends, to Chris Mendoza, because I was like, well, you know, this is the kind of humor, the kind of spirit that you will enjoy. And it's Have Such a Good Day. We will talk a little bit more about this afterwards. However, Sarah, you have a lot of experience. And guys, seriously, if you want to check, just go to about.me/Sarah Lane so you can have just a grasp about her talents, because you have been working, well, on TV, on films, obviously on podcasts, because we just mentioned that. You have been producer for a lot of web shows for different enterprises. I remember you were also in Tweet, for people who is more in touch with the tech shows.
Tech podcast. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, well, quite an experience. So how do you handle, how can you be not focused just in one area of production, but how can you be like so willing and also so able in these different areas?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very kind. I'm so glad that you enjoy my shows. And by the way, Dan has appeared on Daily Tech News Show more than once since I've been on the show, and he's great. So we want you back soon. But yeah, so to kind of go back to the beginning, as Dan mentioned, I have been doing production I started doing full-time production. I went to college and got a broadcasting degree, so I knew I wanted to work in TV. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, not to age myself too much, but it was a long time ago, and you would get a degree in journalism and then you'd go work for a television station. And if you were good, you'd go work for a national television station, right? This is at least in the US. And so that's what I started doing. And I learned very early on that I did not like news. I found, the idea of doing the 11 o'clock news every night, even though it was relatively prestigious and it was what I thought I wanted to do, it was kind of a thankless job. And you end up covering a lot of really bad news. The news is bad. And so I in my early 20s, I decided, okay, well, I don't want to do this. This isn't what I signed up for. I kind of wanted to be like, I want to work for MTV and it's going to be really exciting. And, I'm going to be really creative and weird. And that was what I liked about production, the idea of being able to put something together that was creative and moved somebody in a different way. So I was lucky enough to become part of the Tech TV team. And I was, again, early 20s at the time. And I worked there for some years, that was in San Francisco. And it was a cable news network, even though it was very much not the traditional news network because we were talking about technology and it was all very new. But it was a wonderful job. And I always tell people, even though I've done so many things, over the course of my career since, it was the best job I ever had. Made a lot of friends. It was sort of this magical thing that I don't think can be recreated. So moved to LA, worked for G4. Anybody who knows the Tech TV story knows kind of how that all went down. And after a couple of years of that, I didn't dislike Los Angeles. In fact, I'd live here again now. We'll get to that later. But I kind of looked around and was like, because this is before the internet video days. There was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. YouTube had just launched. It wasn't a place that we could do this. It was, you had to, if you wanted to work in television, you had to live in Los Angeles. And if you were good, you're going to move to New York. And that was it. And if you weren't good, you didn't do either of those things. And so I was kind of halfway there and feeling very disenfranchised. So I ended up kind of taking a step away from the whole thing for a while. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of money saved. At the time, I went and did a lot of extended travel and just kind of thought, in a year, maybe I'll have a little bit more of an epiphany of what I actually want to do, because I don't think this is it. And again, I'm, at that point, my late 20s, so I'm still quite young. And when I got back to the States, in fact, before I got back, I remember being in Argentina and a friend of mine, and this is, again, there were no smartphones, there was no iPhone. This is all before that. And he gets a hold of me on, Gmail or something. And he says, you have to sign up for Twitter. This is really important. You have to sign up for your username. You have to do this right now, or somebody's going to get it. And I was like, what are you even talking about? I was really out of the loop. So long story short, soon after that, I came back to the States and I settled back in San Francisco. And that was when the kind of internet video revolution had begun. There was, people with really prolific Tumblr accounts, that cropped up in that year too. And YouTube started to become something where content creators were posting things rather than just uploading a funny video that somebody watches once and then leaves. And you know what I mean? It had become something where you're like, oh, wait a second, this is a business model. So I became part of that business model, working for a company called Revision 3, which was eventually bought by Discovery Digital. And by the time Discovery bought it, I didn't work there anymore, but it was the first place where I said, I don't have to work in television anymore. I can just do television on the internet because we've figured it out. All people need is bandwidth, and all content creators need is the creativity that they had in the first place. However, there were definitely some lessons to be learned about the way that people consume content. If you turn on your television and you're watching Channel 4, right? And you kind of expect you might have a news program and then you might have a sitcom and, there are 30 minutes and there are commercial breaks. And I understood how all that worked from the old days because I had worked in television. But the internet thing it was liberating, but it was also challenging because I had to unlearn things that I had been taught are the way that things are done when it comes to content. If you're good at what you do, it's kind of like somebody saying, as a journalist who writes a really great article, it's like, well, this is the way that you write the article. Well, is it? I mean, it's like you work for the New York Times, maybe that's still true, but a lot of these rules have been broken down. So over the years, I've moved on to various companies and did stints working on various projects, and I have now landed in the point where I am completely independent. I work on Daily Tech News Show 5 days a week, so that is the bulk of my week. But I have a variety of other projects too, and they're all podcasts. Some of them are video, some of them are audio. Some of them require some travel on my part. Some of them I just do from this computer that's sitting right in front of me and never leave the house. And it is challenging in many ways because I have to be very disciplined myself because it's my time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it affords me a lot of freedom. Like in the morning, I don't go to an office. This is my office. I'm standing in it right now. You think I'm sitting, but I'm actually standing.
It's more healthy actually that way.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and please ask me any follow-up question that you
No,
might
please,
have about
please,
it.
please
But
go. But yeah.
yeah, but I think that my biggest takeaway is that, and what I've learned is being a independent content creator where if I, for example, we're doing this right now. It's a Tuesday night for me, 6 p.m. It's not dark yet, but we're getting to the end of the workday, right? I could take on any project that I wanted to right now and do it and just add that to my workload if I wanted to. If I don't want to, I don't. And that is a really, really nice thing. And it didn't used to be that way. If you go to a 9 to 5 office job, then that's what takes all of your time. You don't have time for other things. You'd have to do it on the weekend, or you'd have to really, really cut into your short amount of personal life that you don't really have anyway. So in that sense, it is great. I also think, and some people are better at this than others. And Tom Merritt, co-host on DTNS, we talk about this all the time because he also has a variety of projects that he's juggling, as many freelance people do. We all kind of do that. And the amount of discipline that I realize I need, to get up in the morning, and got to walk the dog, take a shower, get things done, and then I got to work because nobody's going to be mad at me if I don't. But the work won't get done otherwise, but there's no boss saying, "Hey, Sarah, you were late to work today," or, you didn't get your stuff done on time. It's like, it's all it's on me to be my own boss. And that has been a really interesting learning experience over the last couple of years when I went fully independent.
Mm-hmm. And for example, something that I want to talk, and after this explanation, so everybody has the common ground about how these have been evolving in different media, because you mentioned something that is really interesting. I also, well, I was like in the transition when I was in college here in Mexico, because the journalism major was no longer having that name. It was like, oh, well, now you're not studying journalism. Right now you are studying communications, for example. And we were in a transition in this way. And actually you can see that with the newest generations. Right now it can be like a graphic communications, to put one example, how it's called in some of the schools in here. And they are more focused like in the post-production. So you have to rather, instead of learn how to write a text, you rather have to learn how to use After Effects to create some graphics, for example, because that's what is going to be needed. And do you feel that in some of the content that we have available with different authors, with younger generations, I sound like really old when I say that, or I feel quite old. You think that it has been some kind of switch? Do you think that the lack of the journalism formation, the journalism career, actually has changed the way that we, I don't know, talk about the news?
I do. And I don't think it's always a bad thing, but I do think that, you mentioned post-production. So for example, I was never an editor. I was always a producer, and I worked with editors. I sat in edit rooms and I kind of understood what they were doing. I knew how to tell them what to do, but I didn't totally know what buttons to press. And because again, I'm independent, I had to kind of teach myself a variety of audio and video post-production programs. And it's not rocket science, and it's actually been really fun. Well, sometimes I hate it, but for the most part, it's a skill that I know is really, really important. However, I also know that I'm not some gifted person who can understand this program that other people can. I know that lots of people can understand a lot of programs, and they're designed to be that way. And that's a great thing. However, you also get a lot of there is, and I will also sound like an old person saying this as well, but there are certain journalism rules, right? That they're ingrained in me. That's if you say something, you have to back it up with facts. And the whole kind of fake news thing is like, it's pretty easy for me to point out, like, well, you can't just say something and not, have done your research and that kind of thing. I think that it's easy back in the day, somebody who, when I was starting out in local news back in the day, who was going to argue with what we were saying? You just had to hope that we were smart and knew what we were doing and that the right people had been hired. And people like me had been hired because supposedly we understood journalism. Those rules are completely out the window now. So you get a lot of smart people who are doing really, really work that I am very impressed by, and like it's better than what I could do as far as the whole package goes. But who is holding their feet to the fire if the information is not correct? There's not a lot of that going on, and so we have a whole conversation going on about platforms like YouTube and Facebook that people want to blame the platforms for bad content. And it's a very complex problem to solve. But as somebody in journalism, I definitely see where having tools to make it all easier for us to have a voice is great, but you see the bad effects of it every day.
And for example, now that you touch a little bit about that, I want to mention one recommended reading. I will post the link also in the post where this is being published right now. And it's an article that I found. Well, it's an opinion article that I found on Medium, and it discusses a little bit about the differences between content and content creation or production or producing media. The article it's written by Bob Haler. It's for the AMA, for the American Marketing Association. And one thing that I found interesting, and that's what I want to discuss next, it's about the differences between content creation and media production. Because it can kind of sound similar. However, there are some differences that I believe that they are important. So, for example, in here, and this is the only paragraph that I'm going to mention in here, is media and content impacts all the support provided to sales channels. Media is not content anymore, and usually there used to be like some sort of mix. Like if you were talking about media, you were talking about the content, but no, because in one way, content is a message, and media is the vehicle, the vehicle of the message. And I believe that right now the focus, because it's easier to produce content, quality content, and this is one of the discussions that we have with one of the VPs in the business where I work. I work in advertising, and sometimes he comes like, doing videos, for example, some videos for internal consumption, some institutional videos. My niece can just get her phone and she can actually edit it in here, and in 5 minutes she can have an entire wonderful video with all the messages that we have to give to prepare people to, I don't know, to fill some forms or some sort of information that we want to share. And in the area where we are, in the post-production department, we are like, I actually know how to do videos using my cell phone and edit them in here. But you have to focus also in the message, not using the tools that you are using. And right now, thanks to the technological advances that we have right now, it's really easy to produce. And I'm not kidding. For example, I have a Rode mic that I use a lot with this very cell phone, and I do recordings when I'm going to film festivals. And I also edit in here and I publish it. It's not the same as I'm working in DaVinci Resolve right now in my computer. However, you can produce quality content. But it's like just shiny things that you can produce with animations. However, the message, the content itself can get lost just because you get shiny things. So this is where I want to head. Do you think that there has been also a change between the way that we prepare the content that we are doing? because right now, because it's really easy to produce, sometimes you just have to produce content and send it and send it and send it, but the quality sometimes is like, and you see it, we have pretty much a lot of clickbait articles, but not a lot of analysis in there. So
yeah, it's very interesting. In fact, I produce a podcast right now, which I'm a co-host of as well, called It Never Gets Old. It's a podcast about consignment and sort of buying sustainable clothing. So it has really no tech angle unless you're talking about the technological platforms that are helping us all buy and sell stuff from each other. But the creator of the show, Meredith Feynman, she, kind of said to me when we decided to do the podcast, hey, this is just, it's a promotional vehicle for me because I can use this to kind of to be able to reach other people in other ways, because what I'm, really trying to do is make connections. Maybe articles can be placed on a variety of publications and stuff where that's kind of her world. And I was like, interesting, because when I launch a podcast or a show or whatever you want to call it at this point, you want that thing. There you go. You want that thing to be this entity that's really successful. And I think that more and more, somebody's newsletter might be more successful than their podcast, but it kind of feeds into whatever message you're trying to send people. If you and we've heard a lot of drama about this on YouTube recently. You get demonetized on YouTube. Well, maybe you're selling a lot of merch. And so all that really does is drive people towards your ultimate goal, which is probably to make money, but at least to, amass a group of fans. What I've also noticed, and this is something that when I was working at TechCrunch, I ran their video team for a couple of years before I moved back to LA. So this is, about 4 years ago now. And we, TechCrunch is a tech blog, but there was a video component. And it has changed a little bit since I've left. But at the time it was, we were very dedicated to ramping up video, as many publications were. That was the whole thing at the time. That all the written publications thought that they needed to become video entities, and some have had more success than others. But I found that when we would kind of put together, let's say, if I did sort of a 5-minute, hey, here are the top 5 stories of the day, tech news type thing, did really well because it was something that was easily digestible. People on the internet accepted it. They kind of wanted something that was quick, and it sort of worked in the medium. If we did something that, and many times I was very proud of, these sort of longer form, maybe long interviews with a tech luminary, an Elon Musk or something like that, somebody that we had access to. And, we lit it really well, and we had, little maybe factoids, throughout the 30-minute video. They didn't do that well. And it was always like, why? And the problem was because most of our traffic was not direct traffic. It was like they were hitting that video on Facebook because we had a lot of Facebook, folks on our page. And it's just stuff where most of the time the sound is off by default anyway, so you got to put on, subtitles, some sort of, fancy kind of like, an animation, to let people know what brand it was at the beginning, like needed to be really quick or not at all. And all of the stuff that I had learned in the TV world where you're really kind of, it's a little gratuitous, honestly, we had to pull back from. And I don't know that has changed to this day. And I think that that's why a lot of folks who work in video are disenfranchised, because I still believe in the quality of a product and putting together that 30-minute video that is really good and looks good and sounds good and the information is good and you're like, this is good, but who is going to watch it? And because everyone's attention spans have become smaller, and I am guilty of that as well. I mean, it's rare that I watch something like that front to back. So
Yeah.
and I don't really know what the solution is, but I know that it's a problem.
Yeah, but it's a problem with many faces. We can say it, and also it depends. Right now, the main place where we consume media. It can be audio, it can be video. Usually, it's our phones. Perhaps you're lucky and you're watching something on the TV, but also you are at the same time consuming media in your phone because, well, perhaps you don't need my entire attention to the screen, so I will be looking to something else. So also you
Right.
have to create the content that it's more immersive. It's something that actually claims more of your attention because you are competing with a lot of things. You are not competing only in the category that you are playing. For example, if you are creating video, something that you mentioned, well, I can be rather listening to something. It used to be the radio. It can be the radio in a lot of places. In Mexico, it actually there is still a lot of following of radio and podcasts because, well, in the United States, you actually have had like two or three. How can I say it? Big booms of podcastings, and you can say that. Well, I remember when Serial came, everybody was talking about podcasts, but now you actually can see it on the streets when you are I don't know going through Sunset Boulevard. You not only have advertisement for movies, for TV, but also for podcasts. Funny
Sure.
thing,
Yeah.
for podcasts that not necessarily are being created by independent creators, by people who have a journalism background, but also by celebrities, by characters that were created like and that are part of movies, and they have this different window for expressing themselves, and you have some sort of I don't know if I can call it unfair competition because if you are a popular celebrity, obviously if you create some content but for a different medium, it will be easier for you to create a podcast and grab the attention of the people. And if you are an independent creator and try to compete with him, well, you are in some sort of disadvantage because you are not as well known as he is. But the point that I'm trying to make after a lot of rambling is that you are competing not only with the people in the same category, you are competing with video games, for example.
Right.
And,
Yes.
and different windows. For example, Snapchat, it was something that actually a lot of people started creating video exclusively for that platform. And then you have the competition from Facebook for some of the platforms that actually Facebook acquire, like Instagram. And then you have competition pretty much everywhere. Okay. One question trying to calm my enthusiasm about this topic is like, what kind of formulas have you find, or what kind of tips can you give about something that will get you the content that you are producing, the content that you are creating, that will help you so it can be competitive, like it doesn't matter in what medium. It's something like a tip, like it can work for audio or for video or any kind of window.
Well, I definitely think that if you're talking about straight audio, you're at a huge advantage. As you know, as we're recording the show right now, we've got a video version, and that just adds a layer of complexity. And there's only so much you can do with it unless you want multiple cameras and you want people to be recording things locally, and then somebody edits it later, and the whole thing. So I do think that I think you're extremely on point when you say there's a finite amount of attention that people have. You know, I always joke with my tech co-host that I don't play video games, and I mean I play like some silly games on my phone,
Casual
but
games.
yeah, just kind of stuff where I'm wasting a few minutes here and there, but I don't, because I run out of time in the day. And I'm actually really committed to, certain television shows and movies and certain entertainment where it's like, well, and then I got to go to bed. I mean, the day just runs out. It's not because I don't like something, it's because I just don't have time. And I think that when I try to create any new product, and there have been so many over the years, I always think about that. Okay, well, somebody's a busy person, they have a finite amount of time. What can I offer them that is of quality to them? It doesn't have to be, they am I teaching them something? That would be awesome. Am I providing entertainment? Am I providing an escape from wherever their life is going otherwise? Can I do all three? And I think that anybody who's a content creator is probably thinking the same thing as me on some level. Now, you make a good point that when somebody already has a following, they have an advantage because if they launch a new product, they get a lot of attention, off the bat. Maybe it will succeed, maybe it won't, but there are folks who have really great ideas and put a lot of heart and soul into stuff, and nobody cares because how are they going to get the word out? And so I think that that is something that a platform like Patreon has been very instrumental in helping people find audiences. It's certainly only one of several. I think that there are a lot of YouTube stars that I think, they could just go away. But there are also that is and YouTube gets a bad rap these days because it's just so big. But there are folks that I've found on YouTube that I don't even know how I found them. The algorithm just surfaced them for me. And I've subscribed and I really enjoy them. And so in that sense, I understand that it's not a perfect system, but I relish in the fact that I can find relatively random, for lack of a better term, people who have something really cool to say, and I find them on the internet. And again, back in my earlier TV days, you had no option to do that. There was no option to do that. You either played the game or you were silenced.
Mm-hmm. And it's some of the advantages that we actually have right now, because you can have, instead of working for a specific channel, you actually can create your own channel and create your content, publish it in there. We might have some disadvantages in there because I believe that the word and the revision that an editor can give you, it's something that's really important, because sometimes we can say that, well, I can publish anything without any kind of filter, but sometimes we actually need those filters to make more interesting, so the narrative is more fluent. But nonetheless, actually we have more windows of opportunities to create and also to publish the content that we have. We have some comments from the audience. Thank you to the people who are following us. Christina is mentioning, Chris Mendoza. Yes, there's a lot of good content that nobody watches. That is really frustrating for the creators. Exactly. I believe that we all feel some sort of frustration in a way like that. But also it's an opportunity, because we have to reach for different kind of audience, and perhaps sometimes the audiences that are interested in the products that we are creating are not big. But however, we can also find audiences that are like really loyal, and they also kind of overcome that disadvantage, and they just spread the good word, or perhaps they are willing to even collaborate in different ways. So we can try to compensate with that. Some other comments, pretty much Logan Mayer, Rafael. Well, a lot of people are enjoying the conversation. They are leaving some comments in Facebook. Pretty much they are glad that you are with us sharing your experience, Sarah. So I believe that they are liking it. So.
Oh, good. That's great. I believe it was Christina who said it can be really challenging for folks who are doing really good work to find an audience. And I will say that I find it challenging to find an audience sometimes. And it's interesting because I think if most people would say, oh, Sarah Lane, if you're familiar with me, they'd say, oh, yeah, she's a tech reporter. And I have been for a really long time, but I do some other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But how do I make sure that my other stuff is rising to the top? That doesn't always work. Sometimes there is sort of a pigeonhole effect going on where people are they just want me to do the thing that they know me for, and they don't really care about the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say you're a really good content creator. I think I'm pretty good at a lot of things. I'm not that great at promotion. I'm not much of a marketer. I've never really done that. When I worked, in large companies in the past, other people did that. And so I find it challenging sometimes to be like, okay, well, let me get the word out about this other thing that I'm doing. And you also find, and I think anybody who is working as a freelancer and has a lot of projects knows, well, you don't want to go too crazy because then you sound over self-promotional and people don't like that. So it is a real balancing act. And I find it very challenging. And for somebody just starting out who has great stuff to say and is super talented, I I would never say don't go for it, but I do think that you have your work cut out for you.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned something that's really important. And yes, we have certain areas where we are like more capable. Perhaps you are great at producing. For example, I'm mostly an editor. And for example, I remember that at the beginning, some people actually were looking for me to help them, but as a producer, as an editor, as somebody behind the camera, because that's where I have a lot of experience. But then I was like, well, but I also have ideas that I want to communicate. I also want to tell. And it's not the same if I write the script and I give it to somebody that perhaps it's better than me to express those ideas, but the way that he's going to express it, that she's going to express it, is not the same. Perhaps it doesn't have the same heart, if I can say it that way. But that's also that we have to reach to different areas as independent creators, because marketing, that's actually the toughest thing. If you can create the best of contents, but if nobody knows about you, or if you're putting in the wrong window. I remember that one show that actually Tom Merritt was in here. We were talking about different streaming platforms, and I was mentioning about some of the I believe it was GG, a Chinese place that is like the where you find the most pretty much the YouTube stars, but in China, and you can pretty much make a career in there. And for us, it's something that we don't have interest, because it's a different set, different cultural set. However, if you're willing and able to explode those different areas, perhaps you can be like a rarity in there that can get the audience, because you were perhaps in the wrong country. I don't know.
Right. Well, and that's that really plays into the challenge that we all have. It's what platform is popular where and why, and what game do you have to play, SEO or otherwise, in order to surface your content. Just today, around 3 p.m., some news came out that Apple wants to start buying original content, podcast content. And so, everyone, I get lots of texts from friends who don't actually work in podcasting, and they're like, "Ooh, Sarah, that sounds interesting." And I'm like, well, Spotify has been doing this for a long time. Stitcher's been doing this for a long time. And Apple's not doing anything revolutionary, and I can't just call Apple and be like, okay, give me a lot of money to like do a new podcast. It doesn't work that way. That would be nice, right? But we'd all be doing that otherwise. But I do think that it is extremely challenging to, I think, have something that you really care about and you believe in, because if you don't, it won't be fun and you won't do it for very long. We've all kind of made those mistakes. Anybody working in production, I have definitely worked on productions where I was like, my heart isn't in this. And, it never lasted because you just don't want to do it anymore. And not that even the best projects aren't work. Of course, they're hard work, but there has to be some heart involved. And even so, you can have something that you feel really, really good about. And again, you get to that point where it's like, okay, well, where's my audience? Where's my network? What country do I live in? What do I use? How do I get the word out? How do I compete with maybe other shows that are also pretty good, but mine is good too? And I think that is something that I hear from my peers quite often. And I see shows come and go, and sometimes when they go, I think, but it was so good. But there is a certain amount of audience that you need to amass in order to keep the momentum going. And that's different for everybody. But at the end of the day, most people can't do things for free. There are very few people who would do something for free, week after week, month after month, year after year. And the thing is that, again, we're production people, so we sound like broken records, but it's a lot of work. This is all a lot of work. It's fun, and thank goodness it's fun, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And we have to actually value both the work of others and also our time and the work that we're doing, because if we don't value what we're doing, the time that we're investing, well, it's not really probable that other people will value it as much as it should.
Exactly.
We are about to finish this transmission, but some last comments. Marce, it's saying via Periscope that a great interview. Glad that you like it. And we mentioned at the beginning that they can find you, well, in a lot of places, in a lot of shows. We actually mentioned one of the shows that you're producing. But if they want the daily dose of tech news, it's really easy. They can find you in Daily Tech News Show. Don't worry, it's exactly what the name implies, so it's not something tricky, and I really enjoy it. I am also patron of this show, and I enjoy the GDI section, the Good Day Internet section, and it's how I start my day when I'm going to work, so it's the way that I guarantee, or at least I push myself to have a good day. However, Sarah, I'd like you to tell us a little bit, if I want to have such a good day, how can I do it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for being a fan of Daily Tech News Show, as well as a commentator every so often. And when Dan mentions GDI, that stands for Good Day Internet, and that is sort of our extended before and after the kind of hardcore tech talk. We've kind of put together a show that's become its own show and is very much just, it's just some people talking about life. But you mentioned Have Such a Good Day, and that is a show that I co-host and produce with my friend and colleague of many years, Heather Frank. We do have a Patreon. And it's funny. This is a show that people who like it really like it, but we have a small audience. So we're trying to figure out, okay, well, is this sort of a show that just has a small audience, or is there a way to kind of break out of that? Or do we just kind of keep the niche show and give the people who like the show what they want? So the struggle continues. But anyway, patreon.com/have such a good day is where you can find out more about the show if you're not familiar. And if you like it, I'd love to hear about it. So, send me an email.
All right. And also Marce is mentioning that she listened to your shows. To have such a good day. So there you have it. Also some listeners from here from Mexico that you can find in there. And I'm going to do a plug from one of my other shows. For example, Sarah, if you want to know perhaps a little bit more about, films, perhaps a little bit more about science, perhaps, a little bit about cinema, but you don't have the time, I created some sort of experiment working with the vertical video for IGTV, but it's also, you can find it also in YouTube and on Facebook, and it's called Cuánto Contenido, or How Much Content, if I roughly translate. And one of the things that we do is that in less than 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, you actually get the news about what are some of the releases that you can find on the different places, in this case in comics, in movies, or in about science. So I am also working, this is focused more on the vertical screen, so you can enjoy it on your cell phone while you are waiting for the bus, while you are waiting perhaps, in the toilet. You shouldn't be using it in there, but let's be honest, a lot of people use it like that. And it's the content is created, so actually we work more with the format. In this case, as you can see, it's like a comic book, while you're getting the news about these different medios, and you can find it, look for it on Facebook as Cuánto Contenido. We have also Patreon. It is just starting, so that's why we need your cooperation and your money if you're listening to this, but that's the plug that I wanted to give. And Sarah, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we will steal more of your time in the future, because I believe that we just grasp a little bit more like about the experience, but there's plenty of things to talk about this, about the way that you can produce and actually create interesting content, or at least some tips for people that is just trying to create and release this kind of material. So hopefully we will have you as a guest in a near future. Sarah, thank you very much for your time. It was wonderful to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. I had such a good time, and you're right. We could go on and on about this. So on the next episode, we'll continue the conversation.
Exactly. There you have it. And remember that we also have a Patreon for this particular show. And if you're watching this, don't worry, you will find the link. So I won't promote it again. Thank you very much for watching us. I will remind you that tomorrow you will find the audio downloadable version of this show on the same page, and you can find the video to enjoy it once over and over again anytime that you want to watch it, and it will be available in the same page. Thank you very much. And Sarah, once again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you as well.
All right, and here we are with the end credits.